It's episode 201 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com, and when you're there, please subscribe on YouTube or Stitcher Radio or iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen to the show. I hope you tuned in last week for our big episode 200 extravaganza with Margaret Weiss. We had a great time. So I've got a few sponsors that I would like to thank. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, episode 17 is out. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned is a dark science fiction horror and slipstream magazine that they've been working on since 2015. What is dark science fiction and horror, you might ask? Well, think of it as literary Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, or Outer Limits. It's Netflix's Black Mirror in the short story format, and it's a bargain. Each monthly issue has 3 to 5 sharp, suspenseful, satirical tales from today's top speculative fiction writers. There's a link in the show notes. Also, Dominion Rising, with 23 all-original science fiction and epic fantasy novels. Dominion Rising is the box set of the year. It's going to be releasing soon. Make sure you get your pre-order in. This collection features nearly 8,000 pages and over 1 million words in total, bringing you sharp, suspenseful, and thought-provoking novels of dark forces and light, of magic and adventure, of enchanted swords and galactic empires. Dominion Rising, pre-order it now for only 99 cents. There's a link in the show notes. Also, my good pal Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks have released the second book in their Galactic Satori Chronicles series. The second book is called Kron. The first one is called Earth, and I'm friends with Nick on Facebook, and he has been attending a bunch of cons, and I love seeing the pictures that he posts where he's meeting new fans, putting books in their hands, and none of them are coming back and complaining. That's because Galactic Satori Chronicles is one of the best science fiction series I've read in quite some time. Go pick it up. There's a link in the show notes. I'd also like to thank my good friend Ed Gosney for sponsoring the show. Ed's blog, Cool Comics and My Collection, is a weekly trip down memory lane that is more than just nostalgia. I guarantee you'll learn something that you didn't know before. I always do. Ed's latest post talks about the new Heroes and Villains anthologies that we're both a part of. We each have stories in there in the Villains book. We are got a little friendly rivalry with the Heroes, and they're both great. Pick up both the Heroes and the Villains. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, Amy Hale's series, The Shadows Trilogy, is an awesome blend of supernatural adventure with a touch of romance. Guaranteed exciting beach reads from the talented Amy Hale. Pick them up on all ebook platforms and in paperback. I would also like to thank Stefan Boltz. Please pick up his new book, Six String. I read it and loved it. My daughter recently picked it up and read it. She took it to the beach with her, and she read it in like a day and a half because we couldn't get her face out of the book. She was absolutely enthralled. It's a heartwarming tale of tragedy and triumph and the indomitable human spirit. Six String by Stefan Boltz. Pick it up today. As always, we have an audio clip from Richard Gleave's Jason Crane series at the end of the show. Please stick around. I've got some new audio clips to share with you. One of the absolute best audiobook series that you can get your hands on. The Jason Crane series by Richard Gleaves. Now on to our interview with Terry Brooks. Thank you for listening. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am very excited to bring Terry Brooks onto the show. Terry has been one of my favorite writers since, I don't know, maybe I was 13 years old or so when I first discovered the Sword of Shannara, and have been a fan ever since. So when we were finally able to kind of link up schedules, I was super excited. I'm happy to bring the show to you today. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brooks.
Oh, thank you. Please call me Terry.
I will.
Well, I'll be more personal that way. Not quite so formal.
Well, I'm from Mississippi. We call everybody sir and ma'am.
That is true.
Yes.
Well, I am older than you. It's true.
Right. So, but maybe by a year or two. But
yeah, right. I'm older than everybody.
Terry, I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
Oh, that's very easy. I knew when I was in the fourth grade I was 10 years old. I was in the 4th grade, and I had written a short story as a school assignment, and the teacher gave me an A++ or something like that, and said, "This is a very good story. You should be a writer." And I was very much impressed by her astuteness. It was, and I loved I loved the process of storytelling even then. And it was a goofy story about some kids in a haunted house who discovered that it wasn't monsters that were in the house; it was an alien spacecraft. But that's neither here nor there. So anyway, that was when, and I just said, "All right, this is what I'm going to do." Without 10 years old, you don't have a clue about what this means or how you're going to do anything else. But I got lucky, and when I was 13, I had in the state of Illinois where I was living, where I was born, every school child at various points in time has to write a story about Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
So I wrote a story about Abraham Lincoln, and it got published in a local historical journal. And that was the launching of my professional publishing career. And I said, this is definitely what I'm going to do with my life. And, and then it only took me 20 more years to figure it out.
Oh man, the story has been told, all over the place. You've told this story for years about how you got started in the first book that you wrote. But what was it that was that initial catalyst to begin writing that first Shannara book, the Sword of Shannara? I know that you had discovered Tolkien, and was that what really got you into epic fantasy?
It was. It was the initial launch for sure. I was not even reading fantasy, let alone writing fantasy, for the first 20-some years of my life. If you discount the Oz books and a few of that, and some Edgar Rice Burroughs and so forth. I was writing other things entirely, but none of it was very good, and I wasn't really engaged by it. But at various points, I was impacted heavily by what other writers had done. And when I was 22, a girl I knew gave me a copy of Lord of the Rings, and I said, "This is what I want to do without the appendices."
Right.
And how can I do it? I understood the difference between an academic and the common man, which I was and he was. So I thought what I really want to do is tell a story that just takes you right through as a reader. No stopping, no pausing, no appendices, nothing. You just read it beginning to end, and with any luck, you can't put it down. That was the goal. But what really got me going was I was in law school when I started it. I did not start writing it in college. I didn't do very much in college, actually, except things that I don't want to talk about. So when I got to law school, in order to not starve to death while I was trying to figure this writing thing out, the first year of law school was just a travesty. It was a train wreck. I hated it. I hated what I was doing. I thought the law was stupid and boring. I thought the case law was an endless slog through old horrible examples of how people shouldn't live their lives. So I thought, I was going to quit. And my parents, bless their little hearts, said, no, you go back. You're not paying for this. We are. We want you to continue on. Don't give up yet. So I thought, all right, fine. And then I decided to make a change in my life. And the change was going to be that I was going to start a book. And I was going to write it from beginning to end. And that was going to serve as a counterbalance to the horror of having law school year number 2. So I did this, and luckily everything worked out, because not only did I start writing right along, but my grades went up. So you go figure. Apparently if you write fantasy, you will get better grades in law school.
Well, that's the obvious takeaway there.
Yeah, it is. And I just, as to what I was writing at that point, it was this whole mix of things. You mentioned Faulkner, and of course I was heavily influenced by Faulkner. When I was in college, I'd written my senior thesis on William Faulkner's life. On a theory. But at any rate, I I was influenced by that, and I wanted to bring that into it, and I wanted to bring some other things into it as well that were part of. Be nice if I shut the phone off, wouldn't it? That were part of my interests at that time, and so as I was working my way through this, I sort of fumbled along, and the first draft of the book took me 3 years, and it was a mess. It just didn't work at all. So I rewrote it, and after I finished rewriting it, I decided I was going to try it again because it just didn't seem right. So I rewrote it again, then I rewrote it again, and that eventually ended up where it did. But at that point, it was just an effort of getting through something, because I'd never written anything all the way through, and I thought, I don't even know if I can do this. And I think like most young writers, you are just struggling to get to where you need to show that you can do it. And once I got that far with it, it got much easier to do the editing and the rewriting on the next two drafts.
You mentioned Faulkner, and we were talking about our mutual love of William Faulkner before we started recording. And I think I heard you talk about that on the fantastic TED Talk that you did.
Right.
While you write about Elves. And you said something there that really piqued my interest because I don't think I'd heard you talk about it before seeing that TED Talk. But it was almost as if these stories about Yoknapatawpha County were the key that unlocked the thing that made your writing work. What was it about these two things that seemed so disparate from each other that would actually the combination make something new and fresh and unique and help you to finish the thing that you started?
Well, I think that one of the sage pieces of advice I got from my first editor was quit trying to reinvent the wheel, Brooks. There are no new stories. Don't try to create something that hasn't been written before because it's all been written before. What makes a good story is the telling of the story, the way you tell it, your voice, your approach to it. And I think I was trying to emulate some of what Faulkner had done with his books about Yoknapatawpha County, but I didn't want to rehash that same type of story, so I put it in a fantasy world. And so it was the topics that were interesting to me that I was focusing on, which had to do with the way secrets in families destroy the family or the members of the family. I liked the concept of the trailer trash Snopes and the landed gentry of the Compsons. And the Snopes, of course, who have no moral core at all, have an advantage over the Compsons who do, but who hide much of what they've done that's not good. And so as a result, the Snopes have a crowbar with which to tear them down. And I liked that. And I wanted to do something with that because I thought, and the final thing is that the way power works and, of which there are examples everywhere we turn, that power corrupts. It always does in some fashion or another. And the more stronger the power, the stronger the responsibility for wielding it. And the more you have to be aware of the fact that it can bring you down pretty fast if you misuse it or if you let it seduce you. So all those types of things and a bunch of others all entered into what I wanted to do. And a lot of that was in Faulkner's work. And I can't even tell you why I was so entranced with those books. But when I began reading them, I don't know, I might have read The Bear first because it was a shorter piece of work.
Right.
But I think when I went on to read the entire Snopes trilogy and all the rest that he had done, then I was reading them as fast as I could because they were so compelling to me. And I can't even tell you why. Just the way he wrote, the way he told the story, it wasn't particularly fast paced, but it was insightful and it was compelling and it made me think. And all those things, I think seduced me in the end into absolutely loving his work.
You mentioned that the difference in your approach and Tolkien's approach was the difference in an academic and an everyman, and that you wanted to tell stories all the way through without all the appendices and all of the the technical history and all of that. So when you were approaching it after having this love of Faulkner and being entranced by his writing, I can sense from the beginning that you were setting out to tell a very different story, even though it may have some of the same window dressing that Tolkien. Was that something that was conscious to you from the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. I was not an academic. I did not. I was educated, but my love wasn't of academia. In fact, I found the whole college law school experience stifling and too insular. So for me, in any case. So my approach all along was the kind of story that really, the format of the story that I really loved was the European adventure story writers. So I just said, do that. That's what you can do. And, as a writer pretty quick what you can write and what you can't write if you're paying attention. And I knew I could tell that kind of a story. I could tell Tale of Two Cities. I could tell the Count of Monte Cristo. Those kind of stories were fine. That format would work for me. But his format, where he's writing about a history and a language primarily, and the story behind it is the vehicle to get it there, but it is not the be-all and end-all. And for me, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted the story itself to be at the heart of what was going on, and I wanted the action to be at the forefront. So that was always a conscious effort.
One of my favorite books that you've written, and I've read it at least a dozen times, is Sometimes the Magic Works, Lessons from a Writing Life. And those things absolutely fascinate me. The tagline of this podcast is the story behind the stories and the storytellers, because I started this podcast because I wanted to understand what makes creative people tick. What is that special thing that writers or songwriters or screenwriters or people that create something out of nothing. There's something that sets those people apart, and so I love that book because it definitely gives a glimpse into what was going on during those things. And one thing that really fascinated me is you were very open and honest about the experience you had with the first trilogy, especially, and the relationship that you developed with Lester Del Rey. And if you are a fan of genre fiction, you know all about Lester Del Rey, and he, from what I've heard and read, seemed to be a larger than life kind of character. And, where some people may look back at Sword of Shannara and look at this guy that wrote this epic book, and it was his first book ever, and, it ran up the charts and was a magnificent success. But the story you tell in Sometimes the Magic Works, is a very different story than you might get on the surface. That it was a long slog to get that book finished and out, wasn't it?
Well, it was a very long slog, and the element that most writers don't talk about, but really should, is how much luck plays a part in everything.
Sure.
You got to have the material. It's true, but you also got to be lucky. There's a lot of writers out there who are unpublished who got good material, but they've not gotten the break they need because they haven't found the person who thinks it's the right thing. Book publishing, choices by editors, it's all very subjective. Somebody has to love what you do. In my case, in Lester's case, he loved it, but he also saw a chance to make an example of what he believed to be the foolhardiness of publishing. And he was that sort of guy. Lester carried a card. His business card said, Lester Del Rey, expert. And they never said anything else. But he was an expert on everything. That was his theory. So when he said the publishing community was making a mistake, end of discussion. And at one point, after I had gotten that second book back that I wrote, the one that never got published, that Lester said was not up to snuff, and go start over and do a better one. And I was sitting there in a funk and so forth. And Judy Lynn Del Rey, his wife, who was really kind of the force behind everything, called me up and she says, "So how you doing, Brooks?" And I said, "I'm not doing so good. I'm sitting back here wondering how Lester could be, so wrong about this." And she says, "Well, maybe he's not wrong, and maybe you should take a close look at what he's written in there." And all right. And he says, "But mostly, Terry, you should remember this. Lester is always right." And I said, "Really?" But he was right in this case, because I read it back over, and that book was not what it needed to be. It needed to be something more. And so I went back and wrote Elfstones, which is, to this day, maybe the best book I ever wrote. But I just think that it's a good idea for writers to be, they all have such fascinating stories about how they got published and about how their careers went off. And they mostly don't like to talk about it. And I don't get that. I think you should just be open about it. I've never been the kind of person who says, burnish your image for posterity. I think, really? Don't think so much of yourself, Buster.
Right.
I think you need to be open and above board with people, particularly if you're giving something back to younger writers on coming up. They need to know that this isn't like some kind of hand reaches down from above and pats you on the head and suddenly you're blessed enough to go out there and become a golden writer. You're not. You have to work at it. You have to work at it all your life. It's an ongoing education. It doesn't change. And every time you have to reprove yourself. So I think it's a good idea to let people know that you need to be upfront about it. You need to be honest about, who you are, how you got where you are, what are your weaknesses along with what are your strengths. People are always happy to tell you how great you are, but they're a little less, eager to tell you what's wrong. And that's what you need to hear.
Well, also, I think it's important to understand that the art is work. Sometimes, with people that cover up all of the things, give this weird impression that kind of like the hand reaching down you talked about, like sometimes these books are just given to us, and a lot of times it's a lot of hard work and sweat and a lot of emotion and that goes into that. And when we cover that up, I think we lose something in the telling.
I think that I think you're onto something here. I think that the struggles that you go through as a writer in crafting something that's got some value is what makes it all worthwhile. You hate it when you're going through it, but when you're done at the end, you feel like you really worked hard to create something good. And I think that's the feeling you ought to have. You shouldn't think it was easy. I could do this anytime. That's the most seductive mistake you can make, I think. It's as Lester used to say, the creation of the computer was the worst thing that ever happened. He was always saying things like that. And I said, "Oh, yeah? Why is that? Seems to me it's helped an awful lot." He says, "No, it says because now every writer thinks that every word they write is gold and then they can write it so much faster."
Oh, wow.
I thought, okay, that's got some merit because you can get those words down a lot faster. And maybe it does diminish your concentration on whether what you're writing is as good as you want it to be. Now, I would never go back to longhand or even typewriters, but I do think about, in the editing process, particularly about, do I really need these words? Are they important? Can I just exercise? And I've gotten much, I wrote big books to begin with, but I've been much less inclined to do that in recent years, not because I'm worn out, but because I don't see the value of them as much as I used to. I think that spare is better, less is more, and if you can say it in 5 words, don't use 10.
Sure.
Get it down on the paper, cut to the chase. The good writers all do that, and we have so many thousand page fantasies now that I go through and I want to redline them. I got my pen out. Take this page out. No, that chapter doesn't need to be here. We could cut this down to 3 sentences. I just feel there's too much wordiness. And I guess I know this appeals to some readers, but it just doesn't appeal to me.
Well, and you also, I'm not discounting what you're saying at all, but you also have the benefit of a very rich world where you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you write a book. There's a lot of history that when readers come to it, you don't have to tell them everything all over again, which has to be a help.
It is a help, and I'm reading a new fantasy by a writer who's been around for a while, who did a trilogy that I like quite a bit in the YA field. a while back, and now she just released this new book, or a little while back, and I just got to it. And she's doing that. It's a new world with some familiar tropes, but her description is so crucial to the working of it. And if you change locations, or you change history, or you change whatever, then you have to make that clear. You can't just assume people are going to figure this out because that's what they read the book for. Is take me out of my present world, put me in this world. Let me know what it feels like. What does it taste like? What do you see? What do you hear? And all that is real crucial. The senses have to come into play.
How has the writing changed since you began in the 70s? Did you begin writing longhand, or did you begin on a typewriter? And I'm assuming that no matter what Lester Del Rey says, that writing on the computer has been a big help to you, even though slowing down to pay attention obviously is crucial.
Well, I have terrible handwriting, so if my career depended on that, it would have been over years ago. And so I learned. I took two classes in high school that mattered. One was public speaking, and I was a debater for 4 years, and that taught me to stand up and give a talk or debate with somebody about something. So that was really good. And the other one was typing. So I was a good typist. I still am. I can do about 130, 140 words a minute. So those things really made a big difference. And the main thing that changes for you that nobody tells you about, of course, is another one of those history secrets, is that you will get older. And when you do, your schedule will change. Life will change. You start out by yourself, in a garret somewhere or whatever, and you can do it any way you want to, anytime you want to. And so you have no structure half the time. Then if you're like me and you get married once or twice or whatever, then you have a wife, maybe you have children, and they all demand your time, and because you don't want to starve to death, you have to work. So then you have to work, and that takes up your time. So I wrote in the early years at nights and on weekends for most of the time, and then now, because first of all, I'm quite a bit older, so my energy level is done about noon. Really, creatively speaking, I'm great at 5 a.m. until noon. After that, you might as well forget it. I'm brain dead. I can write letters to people and that sort of thing, but trying to do something creative, new material and so forth, very, very difficult. So that's all changed. And I'm thinking about bed by 7 o'clock these days. So,
that's becoming more of a reality for me too. In my mid 40s, I'm like, man, right now bed would just be amazing.
Well, let me just tell you what, it's going to get worse.
I know, it's crazy. Oh man. You mentioned a minute ago that Elfstones, the Elfstones of Shannara, was probably your favorite book that you've written. I also noticed that the new TV show that began on MTV, and I think it's now going over to Spike.
That's right.
Is based on Elfstone and not the Sword of Shannara.
No.
Why do you think that book is your favorite, or is the one that you think is one of your best?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, and these reasons speak to why the MTV people, when they picked it up, decided they were going with Elfstones, besides the fact I said, you should start here. It has to do with the fact that after I did Sword, I started getting some fan mail that said, mostly from, I had a very young audience at that time, probably almost exclusively under 25. And a lot of them said the same thing. They said, how come there are no women in this book? You got one peripheral character that's a woman. Do you have an issue with writing about women? Do you feel you cannot write about women? Or do you not like women? What is your problem? So anyway, I took that to heart. And in Elfstones, I said, well, damn them, I'm going to have strong women characters. So I had two very strong women characters, and I had a kind of an oblique type of love triangle between the two women and the main Omsford boy. So I felt like that was a stronger story for having that mix, because I live in a matriarchy, by the way. So, I actually know something about women, because they're in my life 24 hours a day, every day.
Yeah. I live with 4 women.
So you go. You and I could share secrets. Maybe not. But at any rate, so that helped. But I think, I put so much into that book. That followed on the heels of a failed book that I'd written 400 pages, and then I had to ash can virtually the whole thing, although I stole pieces from it. And then I thought the story was good. The story was strong. It was a totally original creation for me. There was no reliance on Tolkien anymore. I was writing strictly what I wanted to write. So I liked it from that perspective. I thought it had a great ending. And the reception I got to it is still the strongest reception. And people even forget the TV show for a moment, but go back just before that. And it was the book that people spoke about the most. This is the book that they most connected to. Even though they all liked this book and that book as well, that book was the book that made a difference to them. And I felt like I had done about as good a job as I could do in a book with that one in the Shannara world. Although I think, of course, I like some of the other ones I did later, but it's got that love that comes from the familiarity and the longevity of it being in your life.
And I've watched the TV show with my kids, and it was really their introduction to Shannara. And it was a really cool thing for me to revisit some of these things, watching it with them and seeing their reactions and things like that. And I really enjoyed the TV show. I thought it was really well done. They made different choices with some things, and I was really okay with that, and like I have a choice, but you know how fans get, I really enjoyed it. The only thing that really grates on my nerves about that show is they say Shannara instead of Shannara.
You know what? I had these discussions that when I first sat down with Al and Miles, who are the showrunners, and I just met them, and I liked them right away because they're very, very much the kind of people you feel like you could be friends with, that sort of thing. And they said, we just, we love, and they went on and on about the book and how much they loved the book. And they had read Wish Song as well, and they'd read Sword as well. And they said they just felt like this was going to be so easy to translate onto the screen. It practically writes itself there. They were going to be able to just, take it off the page and put it on the screen. And I said, stop right there. I said, just let me make you understand something. First of all, I know how this is going to work because I've had experience. I know a few things because I've seen a few things. And one of the things I know is that you're going to change it. You're going to be able to help yourself. You're going to change it because you're going to want to make it, put your own stamp on it, and you're going to think there's some things that could be done better in a visual medium, and I don't disagree. So when you feel that you're that point, you don't have to think I'm going to be out there saying, oh, my God, what is he doing? It's not the book. Because I don't want it to be the book. I want it to be the companion piece to the book. So you do it the way you think it needs to be done. Just be true to the bones of the story. Don't mess with the basic storyline. Put it in and change the things you need to change because that's what's going to happen. And that's what they did. And that's always been my view, very much like you said. I don't think if I could have changed it, I suppose, if I decided to put my foot down. But mostly I thought, let's just let them do it the way this is their medium, not mine. It's a different medium than writing books, and I feel like you're when you step into that world, then you're trespassing to a certain extent. And I didn't have that protective attitude that some writers have. I felt like, well, they're not going to change the book, so what the heck? And I don't want somebody someday to come up and say to me, oh, the Shannara Chronicles was so great. I just love that. And I said, we should read the book. And they say, oh, there's a book. That's what kids are doing with Tolkien. They don't know they don't know he's a writer. They only know that there's the Lord of the Rings movies. And I don't want to go that route, thank you.
Yeah, that makes my heart sad a little bit. I know. When you say stuff like that.
I know. Well, that's the danger that the movie or the TV show will eclipse the books. And it's happened.
Sure.
So, how many people know where Field of Dreams came from?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Exactly. One of the things that jumped out at me when I was watching the TV show was very early. I can't remember if it was in the trailer that I saw or maybe in the first episode, but one of the visual pieces that really struck me is you see the toppled over Space Needle from from Seattle, and you get the immediate sense that this is a post-apocalyptic world, in some way, that it's evolved past us. Was in the beginning, when you first started writing the series, did you know that, or did you plan that you were going to go back and tell some of that pre-story and it was going to include those elements?
I wish I could say yes, and that I'm a more prescient figure than I am. But no, I was just writing a story that took place in an imaginary place and time and world, and there were indications of a previous society, but nothing specific. And for years, people said, "Is this our world?" And I would say, "I don't know. What do you think?" For years, I said that until I guess it would be the early 2000s when I gave in to the ongoing deluge of requests to write about the prehistory and started to do that. Well, you can't write about the prehistory if you don't say where it is. Otherwise, it's either not in this world or it is in this world. And I had just finished writing Word and Void, and I thought, dang, this is kind of similar. We're leading up to what could be an apocalyptic thing. I'll just play off of that. And my editor said, that sounds like a great idea. Go with that. So I did, and I wrote, maybe the first 100 pages of Genesis. And it was working so well, I just went with it. And that became, at that point, it became clear. The movie or the TV show people, they said, this is what we want to play up. We want to play up it's this world in a recent future. They don't even want to talk about 1,000 years. They said, but this is it in 100 years or something like that. And so we want a lot of evidence of this world and its artifacts and its tropes and everything else being visible and being present in the TV show. And so that was the marching orders right from the beginning.
Right. When you're speaking of Word and Void, that series is another one of my favorites. And when I first picked up the first one, you're immediately struck that this is a Terry Brooks book, but it's kind of right now. It could be today, or when you in those first opening chapters. What was the impetus for you to shift gears and come out of Shannara and do something completely different in a kind of an urban fantasy setting?
Well, I think that first of all, at periods of time in writing about Shannara, which pretty much marks my whole career, I got sick of Shannara. I thought I can't write one more book, and that happened after Wish Song, which I had been working on it for almost 15 years, and I said I have to write something else, and that's when I did Magic Kingdom work. And then I went back to Shannara and did some more Magic Kingdom. And then at the end of that, I thought, I have to do something else here, So I had long wanted to do some kind of dark urban fantasy. And I wanted to create a world, or at least even if I used this world, I wanted it to be in a situation where there was magic present in our everyday lives, but people just didn't see it. It was, beneath the surface of their observation and their recognition. And so there was this whole war going on. It evolved into this whole war. And between the Word and the Void and their champions, the demons and the knights. And this would be impacted by what happened to regular people. And regular people play a role in all this. But they wouldn't necessarily know that they were playing a role. They would be pawns in the whole thing. This is sort of the old Greek concept about, fate dictating the lives of the common man and sometimes the not so common man, and overruling what their interests might be and simply saying, well, this is what you're destined. This is how you're destined to be used. So all of that factored into writing that story, and it was just an opportunity to do something different that I really was taken with, and I decided I'm going to write at least one book, and see how it goes. And so I wrote that one book, and of course that book got well reviewed everywhere, and it was probably stylistically the best book I could have written. But it didn't sell. Nobody, it sold okay, but there was the same old thing about all the Shannara people saying, well, okay, so what? Where's the Shannara books? Where's the next Shannara? It's like you're in a prison after a while. So I didn't care. I went and wrote 2 more.
Right.
I thought, well, it was a cycle. It was supposed to be a cycle. I'm going to write the damn cycle. I'm going to have a start, a middle, and an end to this cycle. And then I'm not going to write anymore, and they can just scream until whatever. And they did. And they still are. And they're still telling me to get busy and write something else, and I'm not doing it. So anyway, that was really the thing that got me going on it. And then I got to do Star Wars right after that. So I got a break before I went back into a long stretch of doing the Shannara books.
What was we won't talk about it much, but what was the best part of doing the Star Wars book?
Oh, they're all good. No, it was a great experience.
Was it as opposed to your experience with Hook?
Well, Hook was bad because I was viewed as the enemy for some reason, and as a result, I had to fight for every scrap of information. I wasn't allowed to go on sets. I wasn't allowed to come, anything. I wasn't even given material about what was going on until I finally said to my editor, I said, "You bought this thing, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it for you, but I don't know what I'm doing because I haven't seen the thing. So if they want the book to match up in any way with what you're doing, you better tell them to get cracking." And she did. And then finally I got deluged with stuff, but I had to sign those confidentiality agreements. And oh my God, it was awful. Anyway, and I never even got to meet Steven Spielberg. So what the hell? What's the point, right? So anyway, after that, it was when I said I was never going to do it when Star Wars came along. But working with the Star Wars people was a revelation. And I don't think everybody's had this experience that's done it. But I did because I think I had some autonomy that most writers didn't have that have done that work. I wasn't starting out trying to find a way into the business. I was well established. If they told me to go home tomorrow, I wouldn't care. It wouldn't be any big deal to me. I wasn't going to make any money on this thing. I would just, doing something that was interesting and I thought would bring over some Star Wars readers into my world, and which is what turned out. But I got to go to Skywalker Ranch. I spent 3 days down there. I got to spend a lot of time with George Lucas. I got to see some rushes. I got the whole bit. And every time I would say, I had a really good, interesting, one brief part of the conversation that I had. I had 3 hours the first day with George Lucas, and and I said, I'm happy to be here and do this, and I think I can do it, but are you sure you got the right guy? I said, I write fantasies. I don't write science fiction. And he says, well, that's good because I don't make science fiction movies. And I said, oh, all right. So what do you make? He says, well, I think I make adventure stories. And I said, okay. I said, then we're good, because that's what I think I do too. And then I told him about the experience with the Hook thing. And I said, I really, want to know that I'm going to have access to anything I need in order to make this book work. I don't want to write some second-rate story because I don't know stuff. And he said, we're going to give you everything. We're going to open the safe. You can call me anytime if you have any questions.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Sounds good. So we had a really, so about a month later, I started reading through the screenplay to a point where they were talking about the midichlorians. And I thought, what the hell? What's with midichlorians? And not only that, but I thought, what's the history here between the Sith and the Jedi? I don't know any of this stuff. And we're right at the beginning. We should be telling this story. So and he told me when I was down there that he wanted me to change the book. He says, there's not enough in the movie about Anakin Skywalker. I want you to write some original material about Anakin Skywalker. I want to see more of him in the book than we saw in the movie. I said, great, I'll do it. So I called him up and said pretty much what I just said to you about, I don't know what's going on here. And that was the last word I got in for 30 minutes. And I'm like, he goes off on this whole, because I always wondered, how much does he actually know about all this stuff? Well, let me tell you what.
Right.
30 minutes, nonstop. This is the history of midichlorians. This is the history of the Sith and the Jedi. And I'm writing as fast as I can while he's talking about all this stuff. And it was pretty amazing how far he'd thought it through. And it buttressed what I knew to be true about good writers, is that about 75% of what they know about the world they're writing about doesn't appear in the books. It's backstory that they keep to themselves, and they call it up when they need it. And he was obviously doing that here. We don't really need to know all this backstory. We only need to know here's where we are at the present and get moving from there. And we don't need to know the whole history and the scientific background of midichlorians. It's not crucial. We only need to know what they do, and so forth. So it was a very good experience. It really was. The whole thing was great.
I'm really happy to hear that, because seeing your name on a Star Wars book is something that fans it kind of makes it. It's best of both worlds. When I posted online that I was going to interview you, one of your series kept coming up over and over as some fans' favorites, and that's the Magic Kingdom of Landover series. And that first book, Magic Kingdom for Sale, sold, is an absolute joy to read. Well, the whole series is, but it's such a shift. It's such a shift in the same way that Word and Void is, but with a sort of lighthearted nature, yet characters that you really grow to love. And I think, in my opinion, that the reason that really resonates with a lot of readers is I think they can see themselves in that. You have said that it was kind of autobiographical. How do you mean that it was autobiographical?
Let me back up just slightly. The idea for the story came from Lester Del Rey. Right. I was whining around about, wanting to write something different. And so he gave me the idea on loan, saying, you can write the book in a year, otherwise you give me the idea back. And he envisioned it as a Piers Anthony kind of, puns and lighthearted and funny story. But I saw a darker side to it also when I was thinking about who this guy was and what he was trying to do with his life, and thinking about how these kinds of stories always resonate with readers. People struggling with their lives, looking for the Magic Kingdom, looking for something that will turn everything around for them. And I thought that's where the appeal for this would lie, if it lay anywhere, was in Ben Holiday. And I just wrote him from my perspective and tried to make him see this weird, strange, wonderful world as we would see it if we were in his shoes, coming in from this land from the life of a lawyer, suddenly put in a land where magic isn't just pretend and dragons are real. How would he react to this? Well, he wouldn't, not easily. He would be mightily suspicious, and after a while he would be concerned when he found out maybe he wasn't going to come back. So that was kind of where I was going with it right from the start, and then the rest of it, as it does, evolved along the way. And of course, then he gets a wife, and then he has a child, and meantime, all these enemies are circling him in one form or another, and coming to some kind of the stories are coming to some kind of a resolution each time out.
You always come back to Shannara when taking these detours, either into Landover or maybe into the Word and Void or Star Wars. But it seems to me that maybe Shannara is your first love. That it's something you always come back to. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. It's a world I loved from the beginning. It was my first success. And it was a massive success. Pretty hard to just discount that. Readers and publishers will tell you pretty fast, if you go away from this, we may have to forget about you. So there's the impetus of you've created something that sells. So obviously you should continue writing in that world if you can stay energized enough to be creative along the way and not just boring, because of course the danger with these things is that you'll get boring and you'll have said it all, and then what are you going to do? So that was the trick, and the tricks were for me to make that happen, to make it a historical saga with gaps in time, so that I could change the characters out in one generation to the next. And the other part of it was to break up the stories by writing other things, and not just write only Shannara during that time period. But I pretty much, I feel like I followed through pretty well on that promise to myself and to the readers, not to disappoint them, that they spent their $28 or $30 wisely and not on some foolish nonsense. And now it's time time to call it a day.
Well, you have a brand new book out that's been out just a couple of weeks now, or a few weeks, and it's the beginning of the Fall of Shannara series, which is going to be a 4-part story that brings us to the conclusion of Shannara's history. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I saw a couple of interviews with you from a few months back, and it seemed like you were getting kind of inundated with people saying, "Oh no, Shannara's over," and you were saying, "No, there's still plenty of places to tell Shannara stories." But you wanted to be in control of the ending of your story. Yeah, I think we've all watched over the last few years. We saw kind of what happened with the Wheel of Time, and even though Brandon Sanderson did a wonderful job of tying that up, I'm sure Robert Jordan would have wanted to tell that story. Yeah, I'm sure of it. So I'm happy that you are telling these last chapters of the story. And what can we expect as readers from it?
Well, I think you'll get a pretty good taste of things in that first book in Black Elfstone, where I am talking about starting to talk a little bit about what happens to the Druids in the long run, about what happens in a plot line that I've been exploring for all these 26, 30 books or whatever it's been, where science was replaced by magic, and then a new type of science has come in and started to butt up against magic, and there's divisions within the 4 lands that believe in the one or the other, and so there's kind of an ongoing war going on there. So which one of these is going to prevail, if either? So I'm doing some name recognition, character recognition, a few tricks that you won't see coming, I think, as a reader. And it's just some homage back to the things that mattered to readers in the beginning about those books, so that they can feel like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened back there, and that sort of thing. I want it to be a big, sweeping, epic kind of story, so there'll be some battles. And I want to go outside the 4 lands again, and I'm going to do that. Just a series of things that I want to do one last time, I guess, is it. And I know the ending, knowing that for a while now. And I have to, write it so that it is the ending. You can't come back. So I'm just going to blow everything up. That's the way this is usually done, is we kill everybody, and then we blow everything up. And then you can't come back unless it's all a dream.
Right.
So I won't do that.
Someone's in the shower the next morning.
I do kind of want to have a resolution to the major plot lines that I've been following all these years, so I'm going to try to make that happen. So we'll see, if I can pull it off or not.
Well, I'm sure you can. I have faith in you. If no one else does.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. One thing that I've always loved about Shannara is if you are a logical thinker, you can kind of deconstruct your world, and you can say, well, all of these races of beings, you can explain how they got here through nuclear fallout or whatever the mechanism is that created all these different races. But what you cannot do is explain the elves and magic. And I've always loved that, is that even though we can explain away things, there's still that unexplained thing that we can't account for. And it kind of gives you a little hope in the world that sometimes there is a little magic out there, and there's something bigger than us that's going on. So I hope when you destroy Shannara, that you leave us a little bit of that hope that that after it's all done, there's still a little magic.
Well, I'm a very positive kind of guy, and you can tell from my books. The bad guys lose, the good guys win. That's basically my philosophy. It may take a while and cost a lot along the way, but still, that's the way things go in the long run. And I have a feeling that people will walk away from that last book and say, that's pretty much a good way to end this whole thing. I feel like I've gotten what I wanted to from that series, and I don't have to say there's no more, because of course there's likely going to be some more in the prehistory, particularly of the 4 lands that I haven't finished yet. And if not, Brandon will be back. I'm sure he'd be happy to do it.
I'm sure he would.
I've given him, talked to him a couple times about that. He said, I'm not letting you near my books, you know.
You'll turn it into 3.
Right.
Right. Oh, man. Mr. Brooks, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. And I know I called you Mr. Brooks, but that's just what I'm going to do.
To have me on the show, and I do appreciate it very much, and I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, thank you very much. The new book is called The Black Elfstone, the first book in the Fall of Shannara series. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Your website is terrybrooks.net.
That's correct.
Where you can stay in touch with everything new coming out. Yeah. We're going to send everybody
there and on Facebook both.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr.
All right,
Brooks.
Thanks again.
Stay tuned now for a clip from the Jason Crane series by Richard Glebes. There's a link to the entire series in the show notes. As always, tune in every Tuesday and Friday for new episodes of the Author Stories podcast. Find all of the archives at hankgarner.com. Now on to our clip from the Jason Crane series by Richard Glebes.
Jason yanked the coils of safety rope to one shoulder and heaved them out the attic window. The bundle bounced over the roofline and dropped to the yard below. He tightened the harness, making sure the shoulder straps were snug over his sweatshirt. He threaded his rope through the braking device, tested it, and clipped everything to the carabiner at his navel. So far, so good. Fireman Mike would be proud. His stomach flipped as he neared the octagonal window. Had he tied the correct knots? Would he get himself killed? Weeks had passed since Mike's tutorial but he had to attempt the break-in now, while both Van Brunts were at the Christmas Eve service. He swung his legs through the window and felt for the roof. His sneakers gripped the shingles and he wriggled out, grateful for once to have feet as big as snowshoes. He pulled on a ski mask and sang, Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. He lowered his body. Wind punched him in the jaw like a supervillain, surprising him. His sweatshirt rode up and snow burrowed into his navel. He looked down but couldn't see his feet. He relaxed his hands and put a few ounces of weight on the rope. Clots of snow broke away, dove over the edge, and took far too long to hit ground. He drew his rope around the pipe and pulled tight. Now he could drop. No, you will not drop. You will rappel. You will rappel very safely. He backed towards the edge, towards the point of no return. The backyard lurched into view. It was a 4-story fall, and he'd probably hit the stairs on the way down. He sledded helplessly. His legs fell, swung, and kicked the side of the house. Alarm bells went off in his head. He gripped the rope. It looked like nothing. A shoelace. Jason Crane, you're a damn fool. He went limp and fell over. The rope gave a jolt, and the harness tried to castrate him. He twisted, trying to save his poor descendants. He began to spin. His arm bashed through a row of icicles. The spin slowed, reversed, and at last he came to a stop with his back to the house, dangling over the backyard. Thank you, rope. That's a good rope. Well done. He tried to turn around, but couldn't. With patience, he worked out a method of kicking in circles and managed to press his sneakers to the side of the house. He needed slack. He gathered his loose rope to the small of his back and disengaged the brake. Zip! He fell fast, all his weight on the rope now. His feet, planted, shot up over his head. The brake caught him, and the rope vibrated as wildly as a guitar string striking a note of panic. Jason heard a crunching sound and looked up. The leaf gutter crumpled and poured a stream of bitter ice water into his eyes. He snarled and wiped his face, dripping humiliation. Jason rested a moment and stared at his reflection in the glass. He was an enormous Macy's balloon drifting over New Jersey, tethered at the navel like underdog. How the hell did you get up here, kid? He did an awkward split, one foot above the window and the other below, hanging sideways with his weight on one hip. He closed his eyes and reached for the sill, crouching against the side of the house. His fingernails found the weather stripping, and he tugged. Locked. He cursed and tugged again, anger rising. He grabbed the frame with both hands and pulled with all his spider strength. Something popped. The window rose and the curtains splashed out. Jason dove headfirst into the fabric, wriggled and kicked, let out some rope and